Okay, good. Welcome, everybody. Happy New Year. I'm glad to see everybody here. We're back online. Paul is filling in for Lorenzo today. Lorenzo was going to be with us, but he ended up having he had to do a matinee production at the theater where he does all of the sound and lighting. So he's doing his theater production, which is why my lighting doesn't look so good, okay, because Lorenzo's not here. But he'll pop in and say hey at the end if he's able to. So that's my deal with Lorenzo. He says hello though, and he's hoping to say hey in person. He's gonna pop in. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen and we'll get started. This always takes me a second.
And I'll just comment real quick for you guys that are just joining. If you go to Elaine's picture, just scroll above Elaine's picture, the little picture in the upper right-hand corner are 3 little dots. And if you click on those and scroll down and click pin, that'll make what Elaine's doing big.
Right, that way you'll always see me big screen. So yeah, pin my screen. Okay, so here we go. Again, thank y'all for being here. Thanks to everybody who made a donation. We very much appreciate it. That is what makes all this possible. Paul, there's some microphones on. I'm not sure if you can y'all, everybody, make sure your microphone's muted because I'm getting a lot of background. I'm getting reverb. Okay. But can you hear me still?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, off we go. We're going to talk about the great Gothic sculptor architect called Nicola Pisano. He created what was the first great school of sculpture in Italy. He worked in Pisa, which is actually near where I live. And so for those of y'all who are new here, I'll show you where I live. I live at the Castle of Popiano. I don't live in the castle. I rent from the Count and Countess. So this is my house. That's what it looks like when it's nice and warm out. We have the fire going today because it's nice and chilly. So there's Pisa, where Nicola Pisano worked. This is where I live. Here's Florence. Lucca is in the same area. We're going to mention that. Here's Perugia, which is in Umbria. We're going to mention that. And here's Bari down in Puglia, and we're going to talk about Puglia as well. So Nicola Pisano, this great Gothic sculptor and architect, I have always been intrigued by him, and y'all may remember I've mentioned his name several times in some of our sessions. He sowed the seeds for the Italian Renaissance, and he created this school of sculpture with a series of assistants who really led to the Renaissance. They really changed the face of Italian art, of Western art. So he's this hugely influential figure, and yet we know almost zero about this guy. I mean, nothing. We have a document that locates him in Lucca, or anyway, in Tuscany in the year 1258. Another artist, another sculptor, created a will, and in that will, he mentions that Nicola owes him money. So that's number one. It's the first document we have of this guy is that he owes this other guy some money. He signed and dated a work in Pisa in 1260. 5 years later, 1265, he was commissioned to do a work in Siena, and he's called Nicola de Apulia. So his name, we call him Nicola Pisano, which means Nicola from Pisa, but they called him back in the day Nicola from Puglia. He was from Puglia. So he came from this region of Puglia, which is in the south of Italy. It's the heel of the boot. And then there's a document of 1277. There's a commission for a public work in Perugia. And the next thing we know, there's a document of 1284 that refers to him as deceased. So that's 3 documents and a signature, and that's all we got on this guy. So usually when there's a major artist who is super influential, we know a lot about him. We know where he came from. We know who he studied with, where he did his apprenticeship. So this guy, we just have to kind of go on conjecture. We know he's from Puglia, and we look at the works of art he created, and we are pretty sure that he was an artist in the court of Frederick II, the Hohenstaufen king of Sicily and the Holy Roman Emperor. So the kingdom of Sicily was all of this for centuries and centuries. The kingdom of Sicily, or the kingdom of the 2 Sicilies, was basically all of southern Italy. And then you can also see other bits of orange up there, which indicate the Holy Roman Empire. So that's the extent of the kingdom of Federico, or Frederick II. Although he tended to spend most of his time in the south, he grew up in Palermo, and he basically spent his adulthood in Puglia, which of course is where Nicola Pisano is from. So Frederick II was a very intellectual, cultured monarch. He kind of fashioned himself as a Roman emperor, and he encouraged a revival of the classical world in all aspects, judicial systems, literature, architecture, visual arts. He had an amazing court and paid attention to all this stuff. So he, of course, employed a number of artists, architects, sculptors, and they are the guys who were responsible for this building program. He built monuments, he built fortresses, he renovated fortresses. There are all sorts of castles all over southern Italy, and even there are towers even in Tuscany because they were up in here. So this is what you can see here in the center is Castel del Monte, which is this great 8-sided castle just to the north of Bari in Puglia. We took a look at that at one point in one of our sessions. It kind of was left to go into disrepair. It's been renovated. We don't have a lot of decoration left, but we do have the structure. So if Nicola was a member of Frederick's court, he certainly would have known this building. He could very easily have worked on this building. Again, don't have a lot of decoration, but pay attention to those clusters of columns that you can see there that kind of then break off into these, into the springing arches. Federico also built for himself, or had himself built, a triumphal arch. Remember I said he kind of fashioned himself as a Roman emperor. So he built a triumphal arch for himself down in the south near Benevento. It's been heavily damaged from the 1500s, damaged again in World War II, and there's really hardly anything left. But what you can see is definitely classicizing, and you can see there's this seated sculpture portrait of Federico as a Roman emperor. Again, Nicola would have definitely seen these things if he didn't actually participate in their creation. He also would have seen objects such as this actual ancient Roman triumphal arch of Trajan at Benevento in the south of Italy. This is ancient Roman, 2nd century AD. Notice these kind of relief panels lining every square inch of this arch. They illustrate Trajan's military and political victories. So Nicola would have seen objects like this. He would have seen and even participated in the building of the objects commissioned by Federico. He also would have seen private collections. Certainly Federico, who was such a lover of the classic world, had a private collection. We don't know what that was like. And there were other private collections and objects that Nicola would have come into contact with, such as the Roman sarcophagi. This is the great Ludovisi sarcophagus, 3rd century AD. This is in a collection in Rome. I'm just using this as an example. There are sarcophagi all over the place, especially in the medieval period. They were actually collected. They were reused as tombs for nobility. There were a lot of these and still are in Pisa, where we know that Nicola worked. So he certainly saw things like this. From an object like this, or some of the other ones that we saw, Nicola would have picked up things like the technical aspect of carving. The Romans achieved great detail, fine, minute detail, with this kind of a manual cord drill that Nicola was also extremely adept at using. He would have noticed the humanistic, naturalistic proportions of these figures. In a second, I'm going to show you what some of the art looked like in about the sort of middle 1200s of the contemporaries of Nicola. And it does not look like this. So the figures here have proportions that are very close to kind of what an actual human figure looks like. So naturalism, and specifically of the human figures, he would have picked that up. And then also the composition itself. This is an incredibly crowded scene, but notice, for example, the rhythm and axes that are created by gestures, the figures themselves, the limbs of the figures, drapery folds, shadows, light, troughs of shadow, that kind of thing. Just as one example, notice that there is a diagonal here that goes all the way up like this. It comes back down like this, and it creates basically a series of interlocking triangles that the apex of which is occupied by the victorious Roman emperor. So Nicola saw all of this, and he certainly knew what he was looking at and absorbed all of this. So in the period in which Nicola is working, we know that he was in Tuscany by 1258, probably before that, because his son, we don't have a birth date, but we can estimate his son was probably born around 1250, and he was born in Pisa. So in that period, contemporaries of Nicola were sculpting things like this. This is Guido, the guy that Nicola owed money to. And this is a pulpit. It's in Pistoia, and you're looking at an adoration of the Magi, which is actually lovely. And I really particularly like the three horses that are sort of delicately entering the scene. But you can see that, naturalistic details are not the point here, nor is kind of sculpting in the round. There's this very clear idea of the flat panel of stone that these figures have been kind of relieved from. Guido also sculpted the lunette, the half moon shape, over a door, the right-hand door to the cathedral in Lucca. So you can see that here on the left. That's the Cathedral of San Martino, or St. Martin, in Lucca. And Guido sculpted the Ascension of Christ into heaven. Christ is in the Holy Mandala, and there's two angels who are kind of accompanying up into heaven. So that's quite typical of art in this period. So Nicola is asked to do the lunette to the left-hand door. And so he's been at the court of Federico, we believe. He's certainly seen a lot of Roman art, and he's been paying a lot of attention. So he was asked to do a deposition of Christ. This is bringing Christ down off the cross. And this is what Nicola does. In, again, late 1250s, deposition of the cross. It's still a relief panel, so those figures are all attached to the stone, but it's very much in the round. It's very 3D. You can see he used all available space. He's using these very naturalistic looking volumetric monumental figures. He's kind of worked them in naturalistic ways too, where there's not a lot of space in the corner of the lunette. They're kneeling or they're crouching, or he's kind of managed to put them all in here. They're overlapping figures. He's used this kind of classicizing elements that he has picked up from some of the ancient art that he has been exposed to, but he's combining that together with very standard iconography, such as that rough-hewn tree trunk that is used for the cross of Christ, which very shortly after this kind of disappears. We don't really see that so much anymore, but in this period that was very common. So Nicola is combining things together to create this really new monumental style that's quite different from anything else that's out there. I mean, this is a novelty. And he's very successful, and people decide to hire him. So he gets hired in Pisa, late 1250s. He's working in Pisa. We don't know what date he started, but he finished a very elaborate work in 1260. So he must have been here for a couple of years in this space working on that, at least that object in that period. This is the Piazza dei Miracoli in Pisa. You can see this is the Cathedral of Pisa, the baptistry, their bell tower, which we call the Leaning Tower, and the burial ground called the Campo Santo, or Holy Ground, which is where there is such a big collection of these Roman sarcophagi. So Pisa is this great maritime republic. They are living their sort of moment of power, their greatest moment here in the 1250s. They have beaten out in various battles the Venetians, the Florentines. They control trade routes the Far East, southern France, northern Europe. These guys are in charge. They think of themselves as the new Rome. So here they are. They're creating this sacred zone for themselves. It's actually on the site of an ancient Roman sacred space, and it's outside the walls of the medieval city, which is really cool. Nobody was going to have the gall to come attack these guys, so they could build all of this, major monuments outside the walls of their city, because that's how powerful they were. So when you go visit Pisa, a lot of times I think people go and visit this space and don't go into the city, but you can actually walk into the city by taking this street right here, and you just walk into the old city center, and it is so cute. If you go to Pisa, definitely do that. It's a really, really gracious medieval city center. It's also a university town, so there's kind of a good atmosphere, a lot going on, cafes, restaurants, good ethnic restaurants. We go there to eat Indian food, good antique market, and they also have Palazzo Blu. That blue building has a great modern art exhibition program going. So you can kind of, you can go and walk around the medieval center and then go see, I don't know, Keith Haring, it looks like in this case, or Toulouse-Lautrec or somebody. So back here in the Campo Santo, here's another view of it. You're getting there's this beautiful view of this Pisan Romanesque kind of series of monuments. Each one is coherent by itself, but it really forms this nice kind of solid whole. And they use this lovely gray and white marble, so it's this kind of beautiful, serene, coherent space. In the 1250s, they were working to do the decoration for the baptistry, which is the building that's here in the foreground. So they asked Nicola Pisano to work on a pulpit for them. The pulpit is inside the building. This is a round structure. You can see this, from above the baptismal font, also done by Guido, by the way. And then here's Nicola, who designed the pulpit. He chooses a hexagonal form in this round building. You can see it from above here. You can see how the priest kind of uses those steps to get up into what they call the casket. And he places the Bible then on the lectern and then reads scriptures to the faithful below. So here, Nicola chooses the hexagonal form. It's very close to round. Numbers, of course, had a lot of significance in this period, linked to church doctrine as well, 6, 8, 12, etc., multiples thereof. So in this case, they're using 6. They're going to use 8 later on. So he's got this hexagonal structure, and he's added this archivolt, which is the architectural element between the column capitals and the actual casket where the priest goes with the decorative panels that go all the way around the top. So that's new. So on the right, you see Guido's pulpit. And then on the left, you see Nicola Pisano's pulpit for the Pisa baptistry. So the archivolt's adding height, grandeur, a sense of lightness. It also makes room for more art. And you can see that there's this very elaborate structure here. And it's kind of a mix of architecture, sculpture. Which is it? The lines are very much blurred. Architecture is sculpture and vice versa. The idea is that this is a very harmonious monument. It serves a function and it works, and it also tells a bunch of stories, and it's also kind of rich in iconography, and it kind of all, it's a harmonious monument in and of itself. So the historiated panels tell Bible stories going around the pulpit. So we're going to take a look at a couple of these. Last time we were all together, we looked at Nicola's son, Giovanni, and we went into more detail on all of these various panels from a different pulpit that Giovanni did several years later. So I'm not going to go through every single one, but we're going to just pick out some details. This is the Nativity, which includes a series of events, kind of all linked. And you can see there is the Annunciation, where the angel Gabriel tells Mary that she is going to give birth to the Christ child. And she says, who, me? And then here's Mary of the nativity scene with Christ in his swaddling clothes back here. Here's the Annunciation to the shepherds. And then the shepherds who unfortunately have lost their heads are coming up to worship the Christ child. And then in the lower left corner, you can see the first bath of Christ. This is always such kind of a cute little scene. Very common in this period. We have no idea. There's no kind of documented source for this. There's no written source for this. We don't know where the idea of Christ's first bath comes in, but you see it pretty often here. So there's a lot going on. Nicola's using those very classic forms, kind of drawing again on the ancient works that he has been in touch with. He's also really paying attention to the composition. He has given each scene its own sort of distinct space. It's read very, very clearly, and yet they're also all kind of interlocked. And you can kind of see this rhythmic quality to the composition. Here, in particular, there's this great kind of diagonal. It goes from left to right, and it's really kind of encouraging you to walk around to see the next scene. It's that great Madonna in the middle that just sort of takes your eye all the way around. So as you walk around to the right to see the next scene, the corner figure is on the archivolt is decorated with an allegory of fortitude. This is one of the cardinal virtues, fortitude. So Nicola's version of fortitude is inspired clearly by classical sources. It looks just like an ancient Roman Hercules, or even Greek Hercules. There are plenty of examples like that all over the place. So there's Nicola's fortitude on the left with a Greek and Roman example. Hercules with his lion skin. Here's another example. This time, the right-hand figure there on a sarcophagus. So Nicola clearly has decided to turn back to classical sources for this kind of, muscular, naturalistic looking, very dynamic figure of what he's calling fortitude. The next scene is the Adoration of the Magi. This is how you see it when you're on site. You have to look up at it because it's above you. So notice it was actually sculpted with that in mind. All of these elements protrude further out than anything down here. This is still sort of stuck to the base. These guys kind of pop out so you can actually see it from when you're down below. That musical quality, again, here is really evident in the gestures. Look at the arms of the Magi. Those they're bent at the elbow. Those knife-like folds of the drapery, which almost kind of create motion, really lead your eye along. And everything kind of comes to a stop here with this kind of closed parentheses of the Madonna figure, who also was taken from an ancient source. This is a mythological scene on a sarcophagus in the Camposanto in Pisa. And it's kind of hard to see, it's dirty, but there's this woman seated here. Here she is. So if you flip her, she's very close to, it's very important it's not a copy. He's not copying these figures, but he's got this idea for how this woman kind of sets the tone of the scene, and he uses that for his Madonna. Here's the scene of the crucifixion. Notice how the panels here are separated by those clustered columns, exactly like we saw in Castel del Monte, almost down to the materials, it looks like. Here's the scene without the surrounding columns. Again, he's mixed elements of kind of classicizing figures with some of these medieval iconographical details, excuse me. The idea of the dead Christ on the cross in a triumphant pose is very particular to this period. Also, if you notice the upper corners, particular little details on the entire left side of the panel is dedicated to the mourners, who are people who are mourning Christ, St. John, the Marys. And then in the upper corner is an angel who is ushering in an allegory of the church. In this case, they mean the Catholic Church, but this was when it was just the church. And then on the right, the Pharisees have they're a little bit moving into shock and sadness and maybe regret that they hadn't seen, the light. And here's an angel who is ushering synagogue out of the scene. So this is the moment that Christ dies. And of course, for the Catholic Church, this kind of crystallizes everything. So we can take a look at how those two groups on either side of Christ are depicted by Nicola. Again, a very crowded scene. He clearly shows figures receding into space. He's also got them kind of leaning just enough. These guys who are the Pharisees who are leaving the scene, this guy's literally walking out the door. You can see him. And then on the other side, the fainted Mary. He's making space for Christ. So in this very crowded scene, he is creating just this kind of almost like illuminated aura around the Christ figure, giving him some space. So this triumphant Christ really just kind of pops out. Here are those figures. You see a little bit of this kind of naturalistic expression down here. That is really kind of a new thing. Swooning Mary who just kind of, faints back into the arms of her friends. That's a new thing. It actually came from the writing of St. Francis, who had died just a couple of decades prior to the creation of this. And then on the right, again, the group of Pharisees, beautiful, kind of classic looking features of their faces. And then just look at the detail with which every single detail of their figures was sculpted. The beards, the little draperies that they're wearing, again, that use of the drill that he really got from the Romans. And then those knife-like folds, which in this case just really worked to kind of take you out of the scene.
Hey,
Last
Elaine,
one we're going to look at here. Yeah.
we got a question here asking about if you think Donatello was influenced or familiar with Pisano's work.
Absolutely. Definitely yes and yes. And I'm going to mention him later, and I'm going to show you a picture later, and I'm going to show you a Donatello, and he'll come up again. Yes, Donatello was in Pisa. and definitely saw this stuff. No, absolutely. And I'll show you some images as we continue going through here. So here's the Last Judgment panel. And Christ is on Christ's right are the saved, on Christ's left are the damned, and they're down in hell. I just want to show you this, just one more little interesting reference from classical art. So there's the devil on the far right side with his chicken feet, and there's this little demon with this hilarious looking little kind of, huge kind of bulbous head. He is a representation of Silenus, who was in the realm of the god Dionysus, who was god of theater and wine. And actors often wore a mask of Silenus, and it always looks like this with the big bald head, big ears, scowling face, beard. In Nicola's case, it looks like he's created this little dwarf demon who's eating the arm of one of the poor souls who's gone to Inferno. And here's another object, though. Like, we don't really know how or where Nicola came across this, but he seems to have seen an object like this. These things exist in small figurines or even in reliefs. And this is a satyr. What you're looking at is a young boy satyr who's wearing an adult-sized mask of Silenus, which is why the head looks so big. And he's pushing his arm out through the mouth. And a piece of the puzzle here is missing. We don't know what he's doing, but it's not uncommon. It's unexplained. We don't know what it is, but apparently this was kind of part of an amusing sculptural group. Nicola saw this and completely repurposed it and turned it into this little dwarf demon that is now eating the arm of this guy down in hell. And you see this repeated elsewhere. Who knows if the people who repeated it knew what the source was. So after Pisa, 1260, Nicola signs this work when it's complete. He is commissioned to create another pulpit for the Duomo in Siena. He also, and his son after him, do other works here and even direct the building of this enormous cathedral. So in 1265, though, the committee from the Duomo of Siena goes up to Pisa to sign the commissioning documents with Nicola. And it specifies that he will have to move to Siena. And he's going to bring with him his assistants, Arnolfo di Cambio and his son, Giovanni Pisano, who is now, he's still very young, but he is a member of the workshop. And, it's even stipulated how much he's paid per day. So here we've got a similar looking object. This time it's got 8 sides. It's more monumental in scale. It's going to go on the interior of this kind of massive Duomo of Siena. So he's increased the scale. Another change he's made here is that between the scenes, instead of columns, are figures or groups of figures. So it's really even more fluid. There's even less kind of this architectural framing devices. Here's a crucifixion. We just saw the crucifixion from 1260. This is now late 1260s going towards 1270. And it's a very similar composition, but notice there, it's even more densely populated and much more expressionistic as well. So we believe that the son, Giovanni Pisano, participated heavily here. All of these major monuments were workshop productions. So Nicola, may have done a lot of the work in Pisa, but he certainly had helpers. He may have done a lot of the work here, but he certainly had helpers, and we know who they were. They were Giovanni and Arnolfo di Cambio. So this looks like successive works of Giovanni, and we've talked about Giovanni video 37, which ought to be online by tomorrow. Lorenzo's busy, but this is on his list of things to do. We talked about Giovanni really working throughout Italy, and he is disseminating the style of Nicola and taking it further, adding his own sort of version of expressionism. And then the next panel here on the Sienese pulpit is the Adoration of the Magi. Very similar, again, bigger and more populated, and there's just a lot going on. There are a couple little details here which are just really striking. Look at the horses, how this group of horses tends to kind of swing around, and they're almost coming out towards us. This is the Magi on their way to pay their respects to the Christ child in the nativity scene. As the magi kind of kneel down to, in this case, kiss the foot of Christ, to worship Christ. There's just a lot of movement here. And it's not done this time with those knife-like folds. It's actually done with the placement of the figures themselves. This is one magi and his two friends who are waiting their turn, but it almost looks like it just almost looks like this guy is starting to bend down and he's finally bent down. Like there's just this progression of movement. So what I really want to look at here, though, is not so much this scene as the bigger figure you see there on the right. So this is the Madonna and Christ. She's the separator between two scenes. And she is just this lovely, just gorgeous, delicate image of the strong, serene Madonna holding the Christ child. The drapery here, again, is much, much softer. You notice the knife folds are just gone. And just these lovely swaths of cloth are kind of falling down, enveloping this figure without, adding softness to the figure, but not at all covering up the fact that there is an anatomically correct figure under there. Very successful. This reminds me a lot of Arnolfo di Cambio's works. And he, of course, was here. So he may have executed a design of Nicola. This may be his work. In any event, we know he was there. So we see some of his other works, like we took a look at Arnolfo in another video here in these sessions. He left his mark really all over Italy. So he, again, is disseminating this new monumental style developed by Nicola Pisano here in Florence, also in art and sculpture and architecture, Orvieto, Rome, and so on. So Arnolfo and Giovanni together spreading really throughout Italy the use of these classical themes that's developed by Nicola and used in the school of sculpture that's developed by Nicola. So take a quick look at two more kind of civic commissions so you kind of get an idea how these guys started getting spread around the provinces. Here in Perugia in 1278, they erected a fountain at the end of their new aqueduct. They put in an aqueduct to bring water into the city. You can actually still see it. You can actually walk up here today if you go visit Perugia. And Nicola designed this lovely kind of low, gently rising series of basins that comes up out of the middle of this piazza for the Fontana Maggiore in Perugia. It was decorated kind of differently, and this is a civic work, so the commissioning panel chose 50 relief panels, and they asked for months of the year, zodiac symbols, scenes from Roman history, stuff like that. So what you're looking at here is January, the month of January, shown in two panels. They're killing a hog, as one does. It's cold outside. It's time for that. And notice how the architecture fits in here too. We're still kind of blurring art and architecture. You've got these great sculpted columns. You've got the caryatid figures up here, bearing, weight-bearing figures that are holding up the kind of the rim of the upper basin. Here's another figure, and this is very kind of reminiscent of Donatello. This is May. There's two figures who are practicing falconry, and they're riding on their horse, the woman's side saddle. And notice the cinematic quality here. The horses seem to be moving through a continuous space behind those columns, and Donatello does exactly this 200 years later, specifically in the choir lofts for the Duomo of Florence, and also in San Lorenzo, the bronze panels of a pulpit in San Lorenzo. And here is the last work we're going to look at. This is the tomb of Saint Dominic in Bologna, the Arca di San Domenico. San Domenico died in Bologna in 1264. So they commissioned from Nicola Pisano basically a sarcophagus, a square box with 4 panels, all in relief. And the relief scenes show scenes from the life of Saint Dominic and scenes from sort of the life of the order of the Dominicans. And it has all of those kind of the traits that we have been looking at in the other works by Nicola and his assistants. It's kind of turned into a bigger project because so many pilgrims were coming to worship at the tomb of Saint Dominic that the city of Bologna decided to turn this into a much bigger monument. So everything from here up was added. Everything from here down was added. This is an altar. It's got its own little chapel. There's some little bookending angels here. So this work went on for quite a long time, and it's very, elaborate. And one of the artists who was brought in to work here was Michelangelo. Michelangelo in 1494-95, at age 20, was brought into Bologna to add some sculptures to the Pisano Arca di San Domenico. So you can see that on the left is St. Petronius, who's the patron saint of Bologna. Notice how close that is to, he's clothed, but it's very, very close to the Fortitude sculpture. So here's Michelangelo, 20. He's a sculptor. He's pretty impressionable, as one is at age 20, and he is face to face with all these works by Nicola Pisano and the workshop. In the center, another saint. He's kind of flipped the contrapposto pose, and there on the right, you can really see this kind of very monumental kneeling angel holding up the candelabra. So Michelangelo's monumental figures with these dynamic stances clearly influenced by Nicola Pisano in his workshop. So Nicola is this Gothic artist totally on the cutting edge who develops this new monumental style that just sticks and influences the artists of the Renaissance and High Renaissance for centuries to come. And here's a little timeline. So you can see Guido there on the left, and just to kind of use this as an example for each point in the timeline, Guido's figure there is standing with his weight equally on 2 feet, right? So there's not much dynamism in this figure. He's just he's solid. His feet aren't dangling. He's definitely standing on his feet, but all of his weight is on 2 feet. Nicola, 1260, contemporary to Guido, has just busted out of the envelope, and he's got this nude figure who is standing in the contrapposto pose as the Romans used. All the weight is on this leg. When that happens, this foot comes up, this knee pops out. The hips kind of angle this way, creating an angle, and then the shoulders kind of torque and create another angle here. So you've got a much more dynamic figure, and you can see how that goes through the ages. So Nicola's baptistry pulpit in Pisa, his work, the work by his workshop, is just this watershed moment in Italian art. And with Giovanni and Arnolfo, really set the scene for the Renaissance that followed. So in honor of Nicola, we're going to jump down to Puglia, where he's from. We're going to make a recipe that is called a tiella, which is actually based on the Spanish paella. Everybody went through Puglia. Spanish, Venetians, Romans, Normans, Federico, everybody kind of came through here. So there's lots of influences, art, culinary, architecture, everything. These women, this is so cute. They're not making themselves lunch in their living room. This is actually their workspace. And the women in Bari come here to buy their orecchietti. They don't make them at home. They come and get them from these ladies and their neighbors. Here are a couple of just little postcards of this gorgeous, just really gorgeous countryside, seaside, great Baroque architecture. The particular truly there in the Val d'Itria. We have 2 trips to Puglia planned. Lorenzo and I are leading a trip that starts on the 8th of September, 1 spot left, if anybody's interested. And then we have another group going on the 22nd. I'm leading that one, 4 spots left. So send me an email if you're interested, and I'll send you information. And we're finishing up here with downtown, Old Town Bari Vecchia, and their great Norman cathedral dedicated to San Nicola. And then you can see pictures of the tiella. It's made often with mussels, as you see here in the bottom picture. We're going to make it, though, with artichokes. So these are the ingredients we're going to use. If you need any olive oil to make your tiella, you know where to get it. I've been really busy making olive oil. So if you need any, let me know. I can hook you up. There's information for the Puglia trip is on my other website. And then just a quick note about the tomatoes. Tomatoes are included in this recipe. In Puglia in winter, they have tomatoes in what they call the inserta, which is this hanging bunch of cherry tomatoes. It's a specific type of tomato that has a really thick skin, and they last into winter. I don't have those, and I'm pretty sure that y'all don't have those either. So you can use sun-dried tomatoes. You can cut them into sort of, pieces like about that big and soak them in hot water, or you can use semi-dried tomatoes, which I kind of like. They're still sun-dried. They're just not shrinked up all the way. So I'm going to use those. All right, so I'm going to show y'all how to put this recipe together. Here we go, back in the kitchen. It's a really interesting, just layered recipe, and everything goes in raw and it all cooks in the oven. It's great. So the main deal here is artichokes. So I'm going to first clean the artichoke and show y'all how to do that, and then we'll layer it up. So I'm using what they call, these are Morello artichokes. This is how I buy them. And they have spikes on the top. You have to kind of be careful not to hurt yourself. The first step is I'm taking off the stem because I have it. So if you have the stalk, go ahead and use it. This, of course, is the artichoke heart at this level. And so when you're peeling the artichoke, you want to preserve as much of the heart as possible. And then the stem just kind of goes up there, and this is even part of the heart right here. So I'm going to use that nice tender part here, if y'all can kind of see that. If I go like this, you might see it a little bit better. The white part, I'm going to use that. And it peels away like magic. So I'm kind of recovering the nice tender inner part of the artichoke stem, the stalk, and I'm putting it in lemon water so it doesn't brown. And then you just peel off the outside leaves, and you peel them off until you get to kind of lighter colored leaves. These just get discarded. So there, it's nice and light colored. I'm going to chop the top off with those pointy spikes. And the way I can tell if I've come down far enough is just to taste it. So if it's tender enough to chew, then that's good to go. So now I have to take off all of this just kind of rough external dark green part. But again, this is the heart of the artichoke. So I'm trying to pare off as little as possible. I just want to get off that real rough dark green part. Okay, and then I'm going to cut it into fourths. And then each quarter, I'm going to remove the choke. So the choke is right here. And then any little shiny bits up here, those little leaves need to go too because they just don't cook. So I'm just going to kind of scoop the knife under the little shiny leaves and under the bit of choke and discard all of that. And then with this, I'm going to cut it into kind of 2 or 3 slices. This is pretty thin. 2 or 3 slices is plenty. It doesn't have to be paper thin. Let me just do 2 more. It's kind of quick work once you get the hang of it. So that's the artichoke. So to assemble the tiella, we're going to put some olive oil in the bottom of a dish. You can use a casserole. You can use anything that will go into the oven. You know, if you have like a Le Creuset kind of a thing, or I'm using the terracotta because I have it. So the olive oil, I chose a Tuscan olive oil, which goes really well with artichokes. It's actually kind of similar to some of the Pugliese varieties. It goes really well. It's got kind of a bitterness that goes really well with artichokes. So I'm kind of lining the pan here with olive oil. Now I'm going to add just onions. I've chopped up some onions. Onions are not my favorite. Don't really like them. But we're about to put a bunch of raw potatoes, rice, and also artichokes in here. So this is going to help create some humidity. So first kind of layer is some little rondels of onions, which do give a depth of flavor. I'm not saying they don't. I still don't like them, but they create some much needed humidity in this recipe. We're going to add some water too, but it's good to have something that gives off some humidity. And I'm even going to add a little salt right now because, you know, salt helps pull out some of the humidity as well. So I'm going to kind of layer the salt in as we go. So first layer is onions. Then I'm going to put on a layer of potatoes, and I just have some sort of thinly sliced potatoes. I put just kind of a rough layer of potatoes in here. Doesn't have to be too precise. And then on top of that, I'm going to put about half of the rice. This is almost 2 cups of rice. So I'm going to put about half of that in here. Add a little more salt. And then on top of the rice, we're going to put half of the artichokes. I actually have 4 artichokes here. I just showed y'all one, but I had the other ones already done. Soaking in their lemon water. So half of the artichokes go in. So I'm just sort of, can y'all see down in here? I'm just kind of placing everything into the terracotta casserole. And then just a couple of tomatoes. Really, this is it for the entire recipe. I may not even use all those. This is not a tomato recipe. They're just kind of in here for a little bit of color, a little burst of flavor. If I were making the version with mussels, I might use more tomatoes because they also give off some more liquid. If it were summer, it's not summer. I don't have any tomatoes. So
Elaine, what kind of rice is it? And it's uncooked, right?
this is raw rice. I'm going to chop some parsley while we're talking, and I'm going to add some garlic to it as well. So the rice, I've used a short grain rice. It's called originario, which is just kind of an all-purpose short grain rice. You can use, though, I think really any rice. I don't think I would use, you can use kind of Uncle Ben's type, just long grain rice as well. I don't think I would use a real perfume like jasmine rice. I don't think that would do in here, but I think any kind of rice would be fine. So I'm going to chop up some garlic with parsley. It's kind of a classic with the artichokes. I'm going to try to get the garlic into minute little pieces so nobody gets just a huge chunk of it. Although it cooks for over an hour, so basically all these aromas just kind of blend into one another. Okay. So now I've got parsley and garlic. I'm going to put half of that on top of the layer of artichokes. I'm going to add some black pepper, more olive oil, there, and some cheese. I'm using a mixture of pecorino, which is a sheep's milk cheese. Y'all can use something like manchego, and Parmigiano, grated. You can just use Parmesan if you want to, it doesn't matter. So cheese goes on, then the rest of the rice, just sprinkle. Rest of the rice, the rest of the artichokes. I have to dig down to get the stalks, they all sink. There they are. So I'm just going to kind of repeat that layer I did before. So parsley, a little bit of pepper, a little bit of olive oil. It really helps all the flavors come together. And then the last few little bits of the tomatoes. Just kind of spread those around. Now, I'm not going to put cheese in this layer because I'm going to put cheese on top. So we're going to cover the top with some more potatoes. The potatoes here really need to cover all the rice. Any uncovered rice will not cook and will break your teeth off. Don't do that. So we're going to use just enough potato to really cover everything. These slices of potato are huge. Need some more strategic slices. Okay. Now I'm going to pour some water in, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to add cheese as well, but I'm going to put the water in first. 2 cups of water, just poured really just kind of down the side here, so that it should come up to about ½ an inch from the top. So I'm starting out with 2 cups. I may not use all of it. Okay, that's plenty. Yeah, 2 cups. All right, and then I'm going to put the cheese on top. So just the rest of the cheese can go on top. So this is going to go into an oven that's about heated up to 400. Put this in the oven, turn the oven down to 350, cook it covered. I'm going to just put a hot top on top of it. You could put some tin foil or whatever. Cook it for kind of an hour, hour and 15 until there's no water left. And then it will be nice and everything will be cooked. And then turn the broiler on the last minute or two to kind of get some nice color on top if it hasn't already done that. And so that's it. I'm going to show you what it looks like cooked. So here is the cooked version. Doesn't it look yummy? And this is really good. It's good hot. It's good kind of room temperature, lukewarm, whatever. It's also very good the next day. It's one of those things where all the flavors meld together. So let me, I'll serve you a piece and then we can all go and make our tiella for supper. Y'all have any questions? Any questions, Paul?
No questions right now. My question was, wow, I mean, Domenico's going to eat a lot, right?
Yeah, he is. But this thing is amazing. It does not stick to the bottom. Again, it's part of the onions. That's another reason to use the onions. And it all kind of holds together. And so here you go. This is what it looks like. And it's just so yummy, so perfumed. And just the easiest thing in the world. Just layer everything up and stick it in the oven and you're done.
It's making me hungry.
Smells good too. So, all right, y'all. Thanks so much. If there's any questions, let me know. Somebody asked, but there's a question about mussels. I see part of it, but I don't see all of it. What is that, Paul? Can you tell me?
Yeah, it says if you use mussels, are the directions the same? Just substitute for the artichokes?
The directions are pretty much the same. You have to substitute for the artichokes. You have to clean the mussels really well, of course. But yeah, it's basically the same thing. And somebody asked a question about cooking time. Cooking time is an hour and 15 minutes at 350. I mean, yeah, 350.
All right.
Thank y'all so much for being here. It's good to be back. So I think I'm going to say goodbye. Lorenzo didn't make it. Obviously, his curtain hasn't come down from his theater performance. So I will tell him that y'all all said hello. He'll be very happy. And he'll be here next time. And again, he's coming on that Puglia trip. So if anybody wants to sign up for that Puglia trip, we can hang out with me and Lorenzo down in Puglia. All right, y'all. Thanks so much. Yeah.
You're sending the recipe over the next...
Recipes. Yes, recipes going out tomorrow. So I'll send you the recipe and I'll include the indications about the mussel version as well. So if y'all want to do that. So tomorrow you'll get an email with all the indications for how to make the tiella.
Okay.
Thanks. Bye, y'all. Thank you, Paul. Thanks so much.
We're eating your olive oil this morning.
Oh, awesome. Glad to know it.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, y'all. Bye.
Bye.